and we are just right like that back. I'm joined by Farrah. I'm so happy that you're here. So excited to see your face. And Ivonne, a new face. I haven't met you before. Very pleased to see you. Very excited to hear what you've got to say. Let's kick off with intros. Let's start with you, Ivonne.
Yeah, so I'm Yvonne. I'm an AWS Serverless hero. I also work as a software architect at Bill. And so basically one liner about Bill, we simplify financial operations for businesses by offer greater controls and confidence when automating like payables and receivables and spend and expense management. So a lot of work there for sure.
Yeah, that's it. And we're going to get into a lot about Bill.com, I believe. But before we do, Farrah, I mean, come on, everybody knows you. You're the AWS hero's best friend, I think. I think every AWS hero knows you.
Well, I think so. Thanks
Okay.
for having me. I mean, I used to be an AWS serverless hero, so the program is definitely close to my heart. But yes, my name is Farrah Campbell. I'm the head of the modern compute community at AWS, and I get to work with amazing people like Ivonne.
Now, Ivonne, before we jump into Bill, I just wanted to, I was looking you up. No, all positives. And I wanted you to plug your YouTube channel if you are okay with that. I was watching some of the videos. There's a lot of really great content that you've put out. Do you want to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel and why you put it together and like what you're trying to teach?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the beginning when I first started it, like my goal was like make serverless easy. I think for a lot of companies, especially enterprise companies, they've come up with a great pattern on how to build on whether it's bare metal, virtual machines, etc. And some of these newer concepts like serverless computing is complicated and hard. And the thought process was make these videos where I kind of simplify it into 1, 2, 3, 4 steps and take that hard figure it out step away from them and make it easy to get started. I definitely need to do more work there, but
you need to put out more videos.
I do.
Amazing. It was I really enjoyed the videos I did get to watch before our interview. But so we're here to talk more about your architect work with Bill. Do you want to just give us kind of a quick summary of what Bill? You gave us a little bit about what Bill is, but maybe where Bill was before you started this move to microservices. I believe is what we're going to be talking about. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, Bill started its journey to the cloud late 2019, 2020, where they started saying, okay, what is this thing? How do we do it? And basically they did the usual, right? It is that lift and shift everything, on EC2 instances, make it run the way it runs. And a lot of great people that started before me, and then when I joined this past year, is okay, taking that next step on optimization and improvement and innovation on adopting like serverless architecture. And so one of the things that they've done in the past year and a half or so is move to containers, but not only move to ECS containers, but to also start using AWS Fargate to kind of get shift left more of that undifferentiated heavy lifting, to not have to deal with patching servers and things like that, and really focus on our business use case and our core business use cases, basically.
Well, I'm excited to hear you say AWS Fargate because it's Fargate's 5th birthday tomorrow. So I'm very happy to see that. But I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the challenges you face. I know that there's a lot of people that are also thinking about doing the lift and shift as well. And so maybe could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So once we got up in the cloud, I know I spoke on a previous session about we use cell-based architecture. So maybe I won't dwell too much of it on it, but basically every new cell that we create, we have segmented users and their data. The decision was, okay, that next cell, let's create it on AWS. And so in doing that, we said, okay, we've lifted and shifted it. We have it on EC2. What do we want to do with that? Do we want to implement auto scaling so that we don't have this static farm? And the thought process was, let's not invest into auto scaling with EC2 as it stands. Let's actually move to containers because there's a lot of benefits there. And so that was that first step, that first aha moment. Okay, so we moved to containers, being able to not have to worry so much about that orchestration and that scalability. Then we're like, okay, well, we're still dealing with EC2 instances. How do we innovate that? And so, 5 years of AWS features, of Fargate features have been amazing. That really, again, lets us say, okay, I don't want to deal with the EC2 instance anymore. I'm going to take my 15 services running within this cluster, move them all to Fargate. And it took us about a year to get that running. We have about 4 cells. I might be misquoting that, but 4 cells now in different regions across AWS running completely on Fargate. We've had, cost savings, right? Just going from EC2 to Fargate, where like in our lower environments, it's 80% cost savings. In our higher environments, I think it was somewhere around 30% savings. So it's been an amazing move to Fargate.
That's amazing, Ivonne. It's funny as I'm listening to you talk about cell architectures, systems design, architecture, it's almost just as philosophical as it is technical, right? Like you have that cell architecture is not an AWS service or anything. It's how you all are approaching breaking this down into smaller pieces so you can tackle these problems as they come. I think something I also wanted to call out that's very interesting that a lot of people don't consider when they're building microservices is you all also had that separation of data, right? That's one of the key pieces of building a functional microservice is to have its own data store. A lot of people move to a microservice on the compute side, but they'll leave, like one massive database. So very cool to hear you all doing that. One of the other biggest challenges that I have to ask you about with microservices is monitoring, right? So when you have one, instance of your application running, maybe it's even across multiple EC2 instances, monitoring that is pretty standard. But when you have this broken out into smaller pieces, when you get microservices in place, monitoring could become really challenging. Did you face any challenges with monitoring? And if so, how'd you work around those?
Yeah, so we did face some challenges with our core applications, the way they did logging and such. We had to implement little sidecars to be able to shovel those logging into, for example, Splunk, as well as like metrics, with the CloudWatch metrics and such. All these different microservices are, our core application, as well as getting all of those metrics into one place to make it easier for developers to make, informed decisions based on data, on cold hard data, was definitely a challenge. But with that Fargate and container architecture, we have that sidecar in place, for example, that then takes pipes to Splunk, pipes to Datadog, so that we can make some pretty advanced dashboards. I did have like some of the slides I could briefly share.
Let me ask.
Well, you read my mind. You read my mind. I was just going to ask you anything you could show us so we could visually, take this all in.
Yeah, so I'll focus more on the cell-based side of things, more than the microservices anyways. And so in this chart, you can kind of see how we have that segmented. So both you as a person, the compute that your website, when you log in to pay a bill, for example, lives in one cell and that data lives in one cell. And so on the right-hand side, you can see that lift and shift that we started, back 3 years ago, where cell 4 was created in US West 2, and then we created one in Canada and then UK, etc. And so then we added monitoring in place, and let's see if I could switch to slide 2. So with monitoring in place, using Datadog, we started looking at all the different levers of that core application. Running on Fargate, and kind of seeing, okay, where do we do auto scaling? What are our metrics? So today what we did was we decided to let's start simple. So very simply, we have, based on CPU, we have step scaling policy set up so that, we're continuously adding new tasks as that day goes on. This, for example, is last week, one day running our 15 services within our cluster, and just have that watch watch that go up and down based on CPU. We're looking to move to more the targeted based scaling policy. I think I said the name wrong, but I think you get the idea. And start using some of these newer features that have been rolled out.
It's amazing. I you know, as I hear you talk about this too, specifically with Fargate, I'm a big fan of Fargate as well. I love serverless. Farrah knows this about me. I used to work with Farrah when she was a serverless hero, and Chase, her buddy, and big serverless fan. But that's a big shift for a development team. Did you have any learnings as a dev team as you started moving towards this? For me, one of the key factors of serverless that I love is less operational work. I think at first in the early days of serverless, they used to tout no operations, and things like that, which is not true. But you definitely have a less operational burden than you do when you're running these things in for example, EC2. How did that affect the team? How did you all learn from that?
It took a lot of I think for some of the folks that, like I mentioned, they have been working on these services. They're used to being able to SSH in and to run a command and to get a heap dump, a memory dump from JVM, etc. So there's definitely a learning curve. Like you said, the philosophical side of things of architecture, kind of stepping back and looking at that software that you're building and saying, okay, well, why do you need this to run on EC2? Or why do you, frankly, even like, does this really need to be a container running on Fargate? Could this be a Lambda? I think that's a discussion that we have a lot. Just trying to step back and look at the core business problem and say, okay, this is what's going to help you achieve that goal. Start small, start with a Lambda. And when you realize that Lambda, right, there are features that you need to leverage that are not available, okay, then let's move to Fargate. And if Fargate doesn't work, which I don't believe that is the use case, if at all costs you have to switch to EC2, then okay, let's switch to EC2. But it is a lot of that. Like, it's a discussion, right? It's a philosophical discussion. Like, what do you really need? How can we simplify as much as possible, and then get complicated as our use cases get complicated?
I mean, I love, and sorry, Farrah, I love the call out to tooling. I mean, that's honestly one of the biggest challenges a lot of the time is you've got a set of tooling that you are used to working with. You just mentioned SSH just as an example, right? There's nothing to SSH into usually when you're working, definitely not with Lambda. It could be as simple as dropping, a breakpoint in code. You can't really do that once it's deployed out. Sorry, Farrah, go. You ask a question now.
No, I was just really curious. You hear a lot of teams that are, starting to work towards, more of this like microservices environments and things. How, how did you, how did you, I think it was like, how did you get everybody on board with that? And like, what was that process like?
Yeah,
getting everybody trained up and the team bought into like what you guys were all trying to achieve.
Yeah, our CTO of API is great. He really was one of the driving forces here to say, let's do AWS, let's try this. And so he gave a few teams pretty much a blank check to create a couple of microservices on AWS. And in that effort, that's where they kind of started creating this script, like, okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, so on and so forth, and create these templates that teams can just, with a click of a button, go through and create these services. Yeah, there are folks that are going to lean more to what they're familiar with, and if they need to get their service out fast and they can do it in 2 or 3 seconds the way they know, then by all means, right, go that way. But creating these templates and creating these one-click solutions that allow them to create these serverless microservices really has been key for us to kind of get that shift. And then additionally, right, there are times where I'll sit with teams and kind of explain the internals, like, how does this exactly work? How does for example, the Lambda service pull SQS to get messages and then hand it off to the function? So there's a lot of talking there. We've had some teams where they get incentives for getting certification and doing some of the free training that is available, as well as some of the like LinkedIn Learning and different training courses as well.
I am big proponent of enablement and learning. My own journey was a lot of that, like self-directed learning through videos just like the ones that you made. So number one, thank you for making videos like that. But I wanted to ask from an individual level, right? An individual person's level, either someone new to tech or somebody who's been using, memory dumps and heap dumps and things like that, making the transition over to working with serverless as a serverless hero and a serverless expert. Do you have recommendations on how do I get started? How do I make this switch to thinking more around serverless ideas?
Yeah, short of, go watch my videos.
Yes.
I mean, there honestly and truly, there's so much free content out there on, these 101s, like quick getting started. Even like if you look at the tutorials on the AWS documentation, there's a lot of great like image manipulation with a Lambda, or, event driven from S3 to a Lambda, or so on and so forth. Like there's so much content out there that kind of takes a lot of the complicated away from you. I would encourage people to just try it. Sometimes it's really just that first step that say, I'm going to do this. That really all it takes. But yeah, give those tutorials a shot. Give a lot of content creators out there, like myself included, that we've tried to make this easier for you to get started.
And thank you for that, Ivonne.
Yes, thank you. Definitely helpful. I've definitely watched a lot of folks in this community doing all that they can, trying to share everything that they're learning, whether it be failures or some of the best practices that they've adopted. So definitely appreciate all the work that you've done to try to help enable others.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we have to move on, unfortunately, Ivonne. Thank you for joining us, though. And go watch Ivonne's channel. We'll drop a link in chat, too, to your YouTube channel, if you're okay with that.
Yes.
Cool. Great. I'll drop that link. And meanwhile, you stay tuned for more content here on AWS On Air at reInvent.